fois, tu serais d'accord avec François Rognot, qui disait, je sais plus quoi, tu te souviens, ou est-ce que pour toi ce serait sur la frontière?
You know, I begin my talk by saying that it's in fact a very strange fact that the references to philosophers are so important in the Lacanian text, so important. Not only by the number, but the development. And on, for example, practically the most part of the seminar concerning transferences and analysis of the Banquet Symposium of Plato, and so on and so on. The analysis of anxiety with Kierkegaard, the analysis of finalist sadism with Kant, and the Hegelian part during the 50s and the 60s is very important. And so it's very difficult to assume that anti-philosophy is the last word of Lacan concerning philosophy. I cannot think something like that. I think that the anti-philosophy is much more in a context where we have also philosophical attacks against psychoanalysis with Deleuze and Guattari. We have to understand the context too. But I think anti-philosophy is much more a concept to have the possibility of saying that psychoanalysis is something like a novelty, something which is not inscribed in the philosophical tradition. And it's much more something like that, that is an argument of delimitation, of to trace a line of demarcation in Althusser's language, much more than a completely developed concept. That's the first part. And the second part is that, in my point of view, it's finally the same, because I think that in sometimes irresistible manner that Lacan is a great philosopher. And today I speak of the difference of the will, the Lacanian will, to be simultaneously somebody who knows and understands completely the philosophical tradition, and which, with the clinical activity, says also that psychoanalysis is not in the philosophical tradition. A very interesting question, so there is an ambiguity, but the very interesting question for me is why, finally? Why that sort of second step after Freud of the development of psychoanalysis has been in the obligation, the necessity to discuss with philosophy in so precise manner, We can find in Freud some consideration concerning the unconscious, but it's very superficial. We can say something like that. It's not very profound. It's not very interesting for Freud. In fact, the discussion of Freud is much more with clinical orientation of his time, and sometimes with cultural or historical discussions, but not with philosophy. And why, in the second step of the development of psychoanalysis, we have that sort of necessity of discussion with Hegel, Descartes, my explanation, which is of anthropological nature, of historical nature, it's not very conceptual, is that inside the movement of psychoanalysis itself, progressively the question of the medical status of psychoanalysis become obscure. And that finally psychoanalysis goes from really a new manner to displace the symptoms of, in the case of nevrose, to something in some sense much more ambitious, which is to create a new context for what is the truth of a subject, and a new possibility to investigate really the complexity of the question of the truth of a subject. And it is why psychoanalysis is more and more a thinking and less intellectualism practice, something like that. And this movement is very interesting because it's also, I think, an unconscious movement of politicization of psychoanalysis. Because why that sort of disinterested experience concerning the truth of human beings? I would say entire enemies of psychoanalysis today are political enemies. It's true. But it's also because the movement of psychoanalysis itself has been, in some unconscious manner, a politicization against the will of Lacan himself, which always says that politics is nothing. But this affirmation itself is a politicization of psychoanalysis. That is why, to return to your primitive question, is not only because Lacan is really on the common border of the two, is more profound, I think, the movement by which psychoanalysis becomes a part of a new thinking of the destiny of human subjects is across a constant discussion with the philosophical tradition.
One more question?
Okay.
The notion of philosophy. There's a certain connection between the question I have and the question that he asked about anxiety, but it's a different framing. Is it possible to define philosophy in a way that's distinct from the institutions that this practice takes on or uses? And if so, and I think your answer to that would be yes, but I'm not sure. I'd like to hear otherwise. But I think your answer would be yes, that the notion of philosophy is a kind of figure that serves as an ideal of some kind that would be different from the institutional forms that it takes, particularly in cases where institutional forms may not be ideal for the kind of thing that philosophy should be doing, which I think we can all imagine where that might be. If that's the case, does the figure of philosophy include also the practice of thinking about what sort of institutional context it would have to take place in? And if so, does that also raise questions about whether we can is there a problem of whether it's socially comprehensible exactly what sort of practice that would entail? Because, there may not be institutional context in which think especially of academic context where there's almost a contract that says this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing as a discipline. You're not supposed to be thinking about what sort of institutional context you would have to have in order to do what you're trying to do. That's just, so is that a problem or is that just I mean, is that a problem? Does that pose problems for defining exactly what the term philosophy would mean?
En gros, est-ce que la définition de la philosophie implique les institutions dans lesquelles la philosophie se trouve? Parce que, par exemple, une université, en gros, tu l'as dit en gros.
This question of institution and is very important because we have exactly the same problem with psychoanalysis finally, because the philosophy, created the notion of school. The first great school, the Greek word, are school of philosophers. But we have also a school of psychoanalysts. Maybe today we have much more school of psychoanalysts than schools of philosophers. The division of schools, the war of schools, psychoanalysts is a very strange phenomenon. Psychoanalysis is as divided as the Trotskyist movement during the last decades. And to return to your question, I think that it's the same question as the question of transmission, in fact. In one sense, philosophy is an example of purely individual